Hello everybody, we just went ahead and complete Resident Evil Village. Played through it on hardcore mode, and it took me, I want to say about 10 hours, 9 hours and 8 minutes. So, and that's on hardcore. There is one harder difficulty, Village of Shadows. I don't think you're supposed to start off the game with it though. I think it's something that you unlock after beating it, or you could just start with it if you have the, like, deluxe edition or whatever the hell. But we went ahead and completed the game. It took me a little bit longer than anticipated because, honestly, I kind of fell... I was really into the game, and then I kind of fell out of it. Like, I lost interest really big during the game. So let's go ahead and talk about it, spoiler-free, of course. First thing you need to know when going into this game is that this is not at all a horror game. There's one section that maybe possibly, if you've never played a horror game in your life or you've barely played them, might scare you a little bit. But other than that one baby section, this is tried and true an action game. And for me, when I was going into the game, that really upset me because Resident Evil 7 very much was a return to form. I would say the first 60 to 70% of Resident Evil 7 is straight up a motherfucking survival horror game, right? And I really like that. So I went into Resident Evil 8 expecting the same thing, you know, expecting it to be a horror game, and it most definitely is not. So I do think that that's important to know. If you want a scary game, you want a spooky game, Resident Evil 7's the way to go. It's a lot scarier. This game is not scary at all. And that's not just because I have been playing horror games for, you know, over a dozen years at this point. And so I have a resilience to them. It's just straight up not scary at all. More an action game, which is fine though, because if you think about it, Resident Evil 4, which is widely considered one of the best Resident Evil games, is an action game. Resident Evil 5, a lot of people really like. It's an action game. Resident Evil 2 Remake kind of toes the line, but it's a little bit more horror. And then Resident Evil 3 Remake is just straight up action game as well. So it's not like Resident Evil can't be an action game and be really good. But I kind of had to adjust my frame of mind when I was playing this game because, like I said, I went into it expecting a horror game. I played through the beginning. There was a little spookiness, and then there was none, and that upset me. Like I said, I kind of fell out of it. I was not really enjoying it that much anymore, and then I kind of reevaluated. I said, okay, well, this is an action game. Just go into it like it's an action Resident Evil. And I ended up enjoying it a lot more once I kind of came into it with that frame of mind. So come into it thinking that you're going to be playing an action Resident Evil, and your experience will be a lot better. But let's get into the pros and cons of the game. For the pros, the Resident Evil engine, once again, is delivering like no other. The performance mixed with the visuals is absolutely incredible. I still have no idea how they managed to get this crazy-ass fucking tech into this game, or Resident Evil 7, where it just looks this good and it runs this good. It really doesn't make any sense. It's some sort of digital witchcraft or something, but nonetheless, it's still very impressive. This game looks just as good as Resident Evil 3 Remake, which, in my opinion, is the best looking of the Resident Evil games. Resident Evil 3 Remake looked really, really good. This game is right up there with that. Extremely good visuals, but it has ray tracing that you can turn on as well if you want to have your frame rate. But it looks really, really good with ray tracing, the reflections, and the global illumination. I just went through a lot of sections turning on and off ray tracing, just looking at the differences and just being wowed with the tech. I ended up playing the game without ray tracing, though. Like I said, it halves, you know, your performance, and when you're streaming the game and recording the game on top of that, all on one PC, I wanted to have the best performance possible, but the game looks absolutely phenomenal. The sound design is also really, really good. The and that includes the ambient sounds, the locational sounds of enemies like footsteps and stuff like that is really on point. The music is really, really good. There's a couple songs that were actually like bangers that would play through some of the cinematics that I really, really liked. And when you're kicking ass, you know, you're slaughtering hordes of enemies, which does happen a lot in this game. The music definitely is there to kind of pump you up. It's no Doom level where, you know, you're just high on the violence and the euphoria of ripping and tearing, but you know, it's good. It pumps you up. It gets you ready to you know, blow off some zombie heads. So it's enjoyable. It's pretty good. The voice acting is also spot on. I think the dialogue is not very good, but the dialogue has never been very good in any of the Resident Evil games, so it's kind of what you should expect. I saw a couple people complaining about that. Critical as one of them. The dialogue has never ever been good in Resident Evil. It's always actually been known for having terrible dialogue. And this game is no exception, but the voice acting of the shitty dialogue is quite good. So, when there is supposed to be emotion, there is emotion. There's a few very laughable lines, one of which is seen in the demo, where Ethan's just like, "Oh, why is everybody dying on me?" It's pretty laughable, but I can't tell if it's the delivery or just the awful dialogue and writing. So I don't know. There's some laughable lines, but overall, the voice acting is really good. Lady Dimitrescu is fantastic. Heisenberg is really, really good. And overall, I thought Chris was pretty good as well. So there's definitely some solid voice acting in the game, and just audio all around is quite good. In terms of the shooting and the actual gameplay itself, it's very, very Resident Evil 7. All of the gimmicks from Resident Evil 7 carry over, such as animation canceling by tapping your block, blocking when you're getting hit. They actually adopted the system from Not a Hero DLC, where when you block, if you do it right, then you can actually push the enemies away, which was not in the base game for Resident Evil 7, but it was in the DLC, and it was a pretty neat little mechanic. It's not as OP as it was in that DLC, where you just can one-shot everything by just punching its head off, but it can definitely stun the enemies and give you some time to, you know, mount a counterattack. The shooting, all in all, is decent. I had somebody in my chat say that they didn't like it because they wish that you could aim down sights, and they don't like the fact that, you know, it's just the accurate hip fire, essentially, from Resident Evil 7 as well. That doesn't really bother me, to be entirely honest. So, I don't have that gripe. I think the shooting is serviceable. It's nothing special. But one of the big things that they actually bring back is currency. They bring back money, much like Resident Evil 4 and 5, and 6, I guess. Ugh, you want to mention that game? They bring back currency, though, and treasures. So you can find treasures hidden throughout the map. You can then sell it to a merchant named Duke, and with that, you can buy new weaponry. You can upgrade your weapons. You can upgrade your storage. The storage is straight up Resident Evil 4. And overall, I really like the system, but one thing that I would say that I'm not a fan of is when you get a gun, you think, you know, like in Resident Evil 4, right? You start off with the pump shotgun, and you start off with the regular handgun. If you want to, you can fully upgrade those weapons. You'll unlock a special ability, right, in Resident Evil 4, like with the handgun. It'll increase your odds of getting a critical hit. So you can take that starter weapon that you begin the game with, and you can upgrade it to be really, really good. With the regular shotgun, right? The pump action in Resident Evil 4, if you fully upgrade that, it increases its range. So it makes it so it has the longest range out of any of the shotguns. You know, every weapon kind of feels like useful. That's not the case in this game at all. Not at all. The moment that a new gun is possible to get, that gun is just going to be better than your previous gun. And I don't really like that personally. For me, I really love 1911s. I found a 1911. I was like, I'm going to stay with the 1911. This is my gun, man. I love them. I have one in real life. Absolutely adore them. Turns out I got to a point in the game where even my fully upgraded 1911 was doing less damage than the unupgraded next handgun. See, that shit kind of rubs me the wrong way because I wish that I could just upgrade a weapon and stay with it, but the game very much gets to a point where you need to be doing a lot of damage to enemies, and there's going to be a lot of enemies, and it kind of necessitates you to upgrade your weapons, especially if you're playing on harder difficulties and just buy the new one. And then you kind of just feel like you wasted all of that money and time investing and upgrading your previous weapon that you liked. So I'm not a fan of that. They don't have unique abilities when you fully upgrade weapons, like I was hoping that they would from Resident Evil 4. And as a result, it is what it is. Just expect to be replacing your weapons a lot. But overall, I do like the whole finding treasures and scouring through the map element of it to get your money, to get new weapons and upgrade your weapons. I'm a fan of that. I really liked it in Resident Evil 4 and 5, and I like it in this game. One thing, though, I will say is because of the way that the game does the map, when you open up your map, it'll tell you the area will either be blue if you've found everything in it, or red if you haven't. And there's a lot of moments where you're going through a hallway and you're like, you press V to look at the map. You're like, is it blue? Is it red? And it'll be red. And then you'll then proceed to spend the next several minutes scouring every inch of that hallway to try and find that one little thing that you missed so you can make the entire map blue. At least that's how I played it. I've watched a lot of people and they do the exact same thing. So that's a little annoying that, you're constantly like opening the map and checking the map every time you enter a new room. But on the other side, it's nice that it tells you when you have everything and when you don't. So I don't know how I feel about it. I just imagine that as a viewer, from a viewer perspective, it's not very entertaining to watch somebody opening and closing their map over and over again. And then the last thing I'll talk about, so the gameplay, very serviceable. I think it's quite good. Is the story. Obviously, I'll speak very generically about it. But the story involves Ethan looking for his daughter, Rose, and kind of his descent into this, you guessed it, village to find her. And overall, I really, really liked the story. It does a good job of not telling you fucking anything in the trailers. Like, if you watched every single trailer for this game, you still have no idea what this game is actually about. If you played the demos, you still have no idea what this game is actually about. Some people are upset about that, saying false advertising. I made a whole video about that. But for me, personally, I really like the fact that I went into this game, and 2 hours in to playing the game, I had no idea what was going to happen next because I had already played everything that was in the trailers, and I had already played everything that was in the demos, and I was like, damn, what is going to happen? And it does a really good job of posing questions, making you ask questions, and then answering most of the questions, answering some questions that were left in Resident Evil 7 as well on top of that, which is really cool. I enjoyed that a lot. And overall, I just felt that it did a good job of adding some twists and turns to keep things interesting for the entire 9-hour playtime. For replayability, I definitely see replayability in this game compared to like Resident Evil 7. To be fair, I did put in well over like 200 or 300 hours into Resident Evil 7, but that's because I speedran the game. I put a lot of time into it. So for the regular person, there wasn't a lot of replayability for Resident Evil 7. You play through it once, then you play through it again on Madhouse. That's probably all you're going to do. With this game, there is playing through it on the harder difficulties, but there's also, trying to get all of your shit upgraded all the way, unlocking the new weapons and stuff like that they have. So there's quite a bit of replayability here. But it's at the end of the day, you know, it's gonna come down to how much you enjoy slaughtering the same enemy types over and over and over. And one thing I will say is that this game does have more enemy types than Resident Evil 7. Not like that's saying a lot. There's like 4 enemies in Resident Evil 7, but it does have more. Not a ton more, but it does have more. And, but I did still end up feeling by the end of the game that I was just slaughtering droves of the same enemy over and over. So, you know, it's gonna be up to you whether or not that bothers you and whether or not you're gonna want to replay the game over and over to try and get all the shit. To me, I thought the game was quite enjoyable. Like I said, I was a little bit disappointed that it is not a horror game at all. But judging it as an action Resident Evil game, I think it's a solid 7. I think that a 5 for me is an average game, 6 is above average, 7 is good. I think it's a good Resident Evil action game. I think obviously Resident Evil 4 is a 10 out of 10. It is as good as you can get while having an action Resident Evil game. I think that this game is actually a little bit lower on my list than Resident Evil 5. I would say Resident Evil 5 is actually an 8 for me just because of how many weapons and upgrades and stuff there are in that game. There's a lot of replayability, plus it's co-op, which is a lot of fun. So I would say in terms of action Resident Evils, this is a little bit worse than Resident Evil 5 for me, but it's a little bit better than Resident Evil 3 Remake. So that's how I see it. Solid 7 out of 10. Good game overall. But for me personally, if you're not the biggest Resident Evil fan, I'd say wait for a sale, pick it up, 30-ish bucks, and you're good to go. Think it's definitely worth that, and it's definitely worth your time if you can pick it up for a decent price. So that'll do it for me. Thank you everybody for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your day. See all of you in the next video, or stream Maroney. Bye-bye.